The story starts with Alvin, our protagonist, as he looks up at the sky, commenting on the weather. He asks aloud if even the elements hate him. In a flashback, we see him with a man who apologizes as he requests Alvin to lead the party. Alvin, confused, asks for a reason. The man curtly replies that Alvin already knows why. Now he silently questions how many times he has been expelled from adventuring parties. As he ventures forward, he steps out from the underbrush and notices the unsettling absence of people. Normally, there would at least be a peddler nearby. He assumes it is only natural for people to abandon the area after hearing the rumors. Opening his status window, Alvin surveys his resources. He finds himself well stocked but knows that if he wishes to continue his life as an adventurer, he has no choice but to confront and slay the dungeon boss alone. As he progresses, his eyes catch sight of random inscriptions on the walls. He briefly ponders their significance but quickly dismisses the thought, realizing it will lead him nowhere. He continues his march and finds himself on the first floor of the dungeon. He says that magic and skills are nothing outside of dungeons, and he still doesn't know why that is so. He applies buffs on himself and muses that outside the dungeon, he is nothing but a 19-year-old boy. But inside, he is the strongest. In other words, he is powerful. He crosses a territory that adventurers of his age would think of crossing in their retirement. With an iron will, Alvin reaches the 11th floor, hacking at the monsters blocking his way. His variety of skills gives him the ability to unleash power above his level, so he is a prodigy unlike any other. Alvin's talent makes him the perfect vanguard for any party. He can kill enemies in a sea of swift slashes. But that only happens if one doesn't remember the only weakness. Finally reaching the 17th floor, Alvin faces the paralyzing slime. The fight is tedious, the slime constantly continues his annoying attacks. Yet it drops large sums of coins. Alvin ponders about its weakness. It was easy. A spot which seemed too unreachable. He may also spring through the air, catch the slime just as it's about to attack and smash it at its core. Practicing the move, he knocks off the slime easily. He comments that this raiding style is his own original method. When he looks around for the slime's drops, nothing exists. His last weakness once again comes back to life. The same man of the past tells him that they have already hired another swordsman to take his place. Alvin stammers in protest, pointing out his high-level and valuable skills. The man, now visibly irritated, asks if Alvin truly believes skills are the issue. He instructs Alvin to display his status window and directs his attention to the very bottom of his skill sheet. There, Alvin's most standing flaw is laid bare, a drop reduction skill, which diminishes item drop rates by 80%. According to Alvin, adventurers are born with a random assortment of skills that are beyond their control. The more blessed an adventurer is with multiple skills, the more he or she is burdened by a penalty skill, a minus skill he or she must suffer. His own result is an abysmally low drop rate, with only one item for every 50 monsters he slays. In other words, the more he participates, the fewer rewards his party receives. It is but natural that others would nurse a grudge against him, and inevitable that he is excluded from parties again and again. He tries to be content with the hard reality but cannot keep sorrow hidden inside. At age 14, he became an adventurer, incessantly leveling up without anyone. The urge to offset this minus skill made him tough. His other abilities allowed him to rapidly ascend in power, eventually gaining him entry into adventuring parties. Over time, he learned how to relinquish kills to others and adapt to various situations. Alvin takes pride in his unparalleled effort, but he remains powerless against the cruel weight of his minus skill. He sighs, wishing that sheer hard work could resolve everything. Suddenly, a distant scream pierces the air. At first, he takes it for the cry of a monster. However, listening closely, he can discern the unmistakable voice of a human. He runs forward to check, thinking that someone is fighting ahead. Stepping out of the darkness, he sees a mob of yellow goblins. He knows that their numbers can pose a significant threat. He unsheathes his sword and leaps into the fight, noticing a lone girl whose equipment identifies her as a priestess. Assessing the situation, he steps in, slashing at the goblins, and asks her if she can move and whether she has any magic power remaining. She nervously responds that she does, to which he commands her to stand up and adjust her stance. Having caused him trouble, she apologizes, but he simply asks her to calm down and notes that they're both just two peas in a pod as fellow adventurers. She is stunned by his words. He advises her to cure herself first and to prioritize her safety. As he continues fighting through the goblins, it troubles him to find no sign of her party members. Despite the overwhelming odds, he dispatches the goblins with ease. Suddenly, an arrow flies toward him, which he effortlessly parries, and another horde of goblins emerges. He thinks to himself that they intend to just overwhelm him through sheer numbers, but points out that they underestimated one who ventures alone quite often. By activating his skill, Zantetsu, he slices through their shield with a single slash. He spots the last goblin charging at her and warns the priestess, but she surprises him by bashing it on the head and delivering the killing blow herself. As they notice the loot drop, she laughs awkwardly. Relieved they manage to defeat the goblins, they retreat to a safe zone, where she bows deeply and thanks him, introducing herself as Cocolle, a priestess. Alvin introduces himself and asks why she came alone, speculating about her party members. She clarifies that her companions are not eliminated, she has come alone from the beginning. His shock is visible. This is the first time for him to encounter a priestess venturing solo in such a dangerous zone. Cocolle explains that she has not yet found anyone willing to party with her. Alvin expresses concern, calling her actions reckless. She falls silent for a moment before brushing off his words and sitting beside him, deciding it would be easier to show him the truth rather than explain it. Alvin is startled when she reveals her status window, warning her that she should not be so trusting with someone she just met. However, she assures him that it is fine. He blinks at her statistics, skeptical that she is at level 80. Embarrassed, he asks her if she ever really needed his aid. Anxious, she reiterates that he was her lifeline, conceding this was the first time she'd been ambushed whilst traveling solo. She asks him to take a look at her skill sheet. He examines it, seeing the massive amount of abilities she possesses. She then reveals to him that she has a total of 11 skills and thanks him for the compliment. However, he lays his eyes on one specific skill, Usurper of the Severed Head. He had never heard that name before. Cocolle further explained that it is a minus skill, that is, it is what made her have an abnormal level. Alvin is listening, wide-eyed and worried. The skill makes her gain experience as if she killed any monster defeated by her party members. Alarmed, Alvin asks whether the actual person who dealt the killing blow gains any experience. Cocolle hesitantly admits they do, but only occasionally. The real issue, she explains, lies in the kill bonus. She is getting into the depth of what this skill means when she says that it significantly slows leveling for her party members. Finally understanding why she was excluded, Alvin asks whether she could join a party focused on selling items instead of gaining experience, and emphasizes the fact that she is a valuable, high-level healer. Cocolle shakes her head and reveals an additional penalty of her minus skill. It nullifies other party members' skills related to drops and experience. She shows him the whole description of Usurper of the Severed Head, explaining further that it not only steals experience but negates the utility of her companion's useful skills, making it a crippling disadvantage in any group. Alvin falls silent, torn between empathy and the weight of her situation. Before he can respond, Cocolle apologizes for suddenly burdening him with her troubles. Then, as if clutching at hope, she asks hesitantly if he knows about the rumor of Setting Sun Dungeon and its boss, which supposedly drops an item capable of erasing skills. She continues, explaining that she came here in pursuit of that item, though she knows she won't be able to kill the boss alone. Alvin, lost in thought, cannot find the words for his response, feeling as though he may have overlooked something important. Then, as if a switch flips in his head, realization dawns. If her decreased drop rate skill nullifies his own, what effect would that have on his penalties? He takes a deep breath to calm himself down. Then, continuing, Cocolle lets him know she is keen on perfecting her work and sees no reason for forming a party with him as well. She wants to have just the item. Every other thing, she assures, will belong to him. He remains silent, leaving her fidgeting uncomfortably. She tries to suggest forming a party but is interrupted when he suddenly calls her name, catching her off guard. His voice is firm as he asks why she won't just form a party with him. Blushing, she averts her gaze, questioning if he even listened to what she said. Later, they descend to the 17th floor. Cocolle is worried, asking Alvin if they made the wrong decision in coming there alone. He assures her that her ability won't land them in hot water and casually mentions he just needs her for a couple of battles. She volunteers to cast a buff, and he freezes, his eyes glistening with gratitude. Before he can say thank you, she calls him sharply, pointing ahead. Alvin looks up, realizing only too late the existence of another paralyzing slime. He readies his sword and hopes in silence that his hypothesis is correct. He gives one decisive strike that cracks its core. Coins shower him down in abundance. He and Cocolle stand in silent shock. Cocolle stares at his technique while Alvin stares at the heap in amazement. Determined to prove his theory further, he fixates on a yellow group of goblins. Each strike yields more loot. Items clatter to the ground, and Cocolle discovers a rare potion among them. Still unconvinced by his own luck, he slays an electric spider, prompting Cocolle to retrieve a glowing lightning ball. She remarks on his streak of fortune, but Alvin only stares at her stunned. Curious, she tilts her head, wondering why he looks so bewildered. Abruptly, he calls her name again, startling her. She instinctively apologizes, assuming she has annoyed him. Instead, he grins with uncontainable excitement and asks, once more, if she will form a party with him. Blushing profusely, she stammers, asking if they aren't already in a party. Realization dawns on Alvin, and without hesitation, he asks her to stay by his side forever. Her face flushes deep red at his sudden confession. She struggles to respond, reminding him they only just met. But Alvin pushes on, insisting that regardless of time, she has already exposed everything to him. Wordless, she looks at him, as if she cannot process what he is saying. He calls it fate, but she wrestles at the notion, unable to fathom how he could believe such a thing. Still blushing, she points out that she hardly knows him. A moment passes before Alvin confesses that he, too, possesses a minus skill. Unlike hers, however, his is neither rare nor valuable. Cocolle freezes, appalled to learn he suffers from drop rate reduction, a skill she had only heard of in whispers. She can hardly credit it is considered special, realizing just how much he must have endured to survive this long. Alvin reveals that he was recently expelled from another party. Understanding flickers across her face. Quietly, she asks if his goal mirrors her own. He nods. Then she has a realization. Even with everything that is going on, loot still drops at normal rates. Alvin explains it is all thanks to her skill. Cocolle stiffens, unable to understand what he's saying. Her skill only ever brought hardship to other people. She even claims that no kill bonus was added. Alvin confirms this, adding that neither have any drop-boosting skills, such as the abilities those former party members were known to possess, been used. She is frustrated. No good will come from annoying him further, she claims. But Alvin shakes his head. His drop reduction hadn't triggered, he explains, and so long as they stay together, he could be an ordinary swordsman. Realization flits across her face. Perhaps he realized the worth of her talent because, for once, it benefits someone. Still, Cocolle's mind lingers on his earlier words. She hesitantly asks what he meant by staying together forever. Alvin's eyes soften as he clarifies further that he wants to continue adventuring with her even after the dungeon raid is over. Her heart skips, and she blushes once more. Noticing her expression, Alvin tips his head and casually inquires if something is amiss. Cocolle brushes it off with a chuckle, faintly smiling. She reluctantly confesses that, for the first time, her talent feels like it has a purpose. Alvin gazes at her intently, understanding the sentiment in her words. He assures her he won't pry and inquires if she'll stick around until they finish the dungeon. Cocolle extends her hand. Even if it's only for a brief spell, she hopes they can endure each other's company. Alvin shakes her hand, silently hoping for the same. Alvin quickly slices his way through the 24th floor of the dungeon, cutting down all the monsters in his way. He takes a deep breath, his eyes scanning the items he has collected, and a sense of joy wells up within him at the thought that one day his storage might overflow with drops. Turning his attention to Cocolle, he asks her to help gather the scattered items. She doesn't object, and her skills make the task so much more convenient. Though they had only coincidentally met, Alvin finds it very hard to believe how few people are like this person. As his eyes still fixate on her, he realizes something. Cocolle is visibly exhausted and restless. There's a look of worry that passes in his eyes when he suggests they should take a break. Startled by his sudden concern, she quickly insists that she is perfectly fine. However, Alvin steps closer to her, his expression serious. His voice is firm as he tells her that even if their party is temporary, they are still a team. If she has any concerns, he urges her to voice them so that they can find a way to address the issue together. His words catch her off guard, and she blushes faintly. For a brief moment, Cocolle falls silent, but then she remembers something. Hesitantly, she remarks that Alvin's ability to kill monsters in a single blow has been on her mind. She points out that even creatures like paralyzing slimes, which are difficult to deal with, fall effortlessly by his hand. Because of this, she assumes that he must be wielding some kind of rare or unique sword. Alvin follows her gaze as it shifts to the weapon in his hand. With a small shrug, he calmly tells her that his sword is nothing special. just an ordinary weapon appropriate for his level. Cocolle furrows her brow, unconvinced. She asks how he can kill monsters like the paralyzing slime in one hit, pointing out that even with her buff, his performance seems too exceptional. He explains it with a simple reason, showing that as long as he hits at their weakness, he can easily take down medium-layer monsters with one blow. He reminds her that her strength-boosting buff plays a role as well, reinforcing his attacks. Even as she listens to his reasoning, Cocolle can hardly believe it. Despite providing support, she finds it strange that he manages to eliminate every monster they encounter with just one strike. Alvin, however, takes her disbelief as a compliment. He explains that he has spent a great deal of time researching monster weaknesses to ensure that he does not become a burden to his teammates. Truthfully, he confesses, part of him simply wants to impress her with his abilities. Cocolle's face flushes deeper at his words. Alvin smiles and tells her that she is a precious fellow he was fortunate to meet. He assures her that, even if he ever shows weakness, he will do everything he can to make sure she does not give up on him. For a moment, she is left silent. Finally, she nods, understanding the depth of his sincerity. As they move forward, Cocolle's gaze drifts slightly behind them, and something catches her eye, a treasure chest resting in the shadows. She stops and points it out, questioning whether it might be a mimic. Alvin immediately steps forward, instructing her to let him handle it. He urges her to stay behind, ready to back him if it becomes a trap. Alvin hesitates for a moment, always nervous when opening chests as a lone adventurer. Having someone like Cocolle to have his back does feel comforting. Wielding his hands with utmost care, he unlatches the chest, bracing for the worst. However, inside, he finds a scroll that reads even more text on the alleged boss drop. Relieved, he waves that relief over him, since he realizes his minus skill is nullified and now has no need to bother about the effects. They have taken one step further towards their ultimate goal, the skill-erasing item they have been seeking. Her eyes land on the scroll, and a gentle sadness peeks through from behind the smile. Yet she tries to give a little smile and informs Alvin Sand that if there is only one person able to wield the skill-erasing item, then he should be the one to use it for himself. Alvin wrinkles his forehead in confusion, inquiring about the sudden statement. She locks eyes with him and explains, saying that she has been pondering the matter. She thinks the sought-after item is unique and powerful, but suspects there may be other similar items out there. With a twinkle in her eye, she declares that when the time comes, she'll be in debt to him for his assistance. As Alvin looks at her, he realizes why she has been looking down. In a calm but resolute voice, he tells her that if only one of them can use the item, then they should sell it. Cocolle's eyes widen in shock, and she immediately questions why he would suggest such a thing. Alvin replies without hesitation that experience matters more than anything else. He wants a comrade who will be willing to explore the dungeon by his side. Provided he has Cocolle with him, his minus skill can be overcome. His current level is already high enough. He reassures her that he has no complaints about remaining as he is for the time being. A gentle smile presses at Cocolle's mouth. She thanks him for finally saying this, but her countenance changes once more into one of doubt. Then she says that should that continue, he'll naturally get frustrated since no obvious rewards come his way along with the loss of his experience points. That's simply how things have been in her opinion. She glances down once again with a tinge of sorrow. Alvin listens, fully hearing her concerns. He remembers that minus skills are deeply in line with emotions. He recalled hearing stories about such when he was younger, of adventurers consumed by jealousy, suspicion, and humility. These stories seemed so far away at the time, but now he finally grasps what they meant. Minus skills not only consume their wielders but also their companions, which draws out their negative emotions. Alvin sees that he has worn the same expression Cocolle does now. He turns so that he faces her. He speaks, deep and steady. By name he calls out to her, asking her to listen, really listen, to the words of an adventurer who is standing in the same stance as she is. Slowly he kneeled before her, gazing straight into her, solemnly promising that he would never betray her. Though he vowed with all his might, Cocolle did not utter a word, her eyes on the ground. Alvin stood up, his face confused as he asked himself if he had spoken too much. He was at a loss for what to do next, so he changed the subject, telling her that the thing was not for one person's use alone. They do not know the full details yet, and he advises that they should worry about it only after obtaining the item. Cocolle suppresses a faint smile and nods in agreement. Bowing slightly, she apologizes for speaking so strangely. Alvin gently waves off her apology, telling her it was unnecessary. With a light-hearted gesture, he ruffles his hair, asking if they should continue their journey. Cocolle nods in response, and as she walks, she whispers to himself that he is really a great man. She contemplates as she reflects on their meeting, how he before her in the dungeon emerged, on the same floor, as it were, like an adventurer predetermined to cross her way. Alvin, having terrific talent, seemed to emote an energy that few had ever seen. She can recall without thinking how she just opened up to him about her minus skill. To her, their meeting feels like fate. Yet doubts resurface. For Alvin to willingly team up with someone burdened by a negative skill feels almost too good to be true. He claims that their relationship is based on mutual experiences, but unlike all the other explorers she has encountered, there is no guarantee that he will not turn back on his word. As long as she has this accursed talent, she fears that might happen. However, as she remembers Alvin's heartfelt promise, the weight of her negative thoughts begins to lift. She reminds herself that regardless of the result, she can live with it if she remains at his side. Then suddenly, a faint noise echoes through the silence, and both explorers stop dead in their tracks, their senses on high alert. Alvin's keen senses catch the scent of battle, but something is off. He turns to Cocolle and states that this is no ordinary battle ahead. Apologizing briefly, he urges her to follow him in order to investigate. She nods in understanding, and together they speed toward the source of the commotion. They arrive at the location, and to Alvin's utter astonishment, he finds a huge number of golems gathered in one spot. He narrows his eyes and immediately guesses there might be adventurers trapped within. Standing next to him is Cocolle, who voices her concern about it, expressing that it might be too much for him to handle by himself. On the flip side, he boldly proclaims that he's ready to tackle any monster that comes his way. But just as he's about to charge in, Cocolle advises him to hold up for a buff. Alvin ignores her and goes for it, activating his Zantetsu skill to slice at the nearest golem, only to find that his blade can't break through its tough exterior. Frustrated, he takes a moment while Cocolle apologizes for the delayed buff. Ever the optimist, Alvin lets her know he's got the monster's full attention now. With urgency, he instructs her to buff him now, and she immediately begins chanting. Emerald golems, known for their high resistance to physical attacks, are notoriously poor matches for swords. Nevertheless, Alvin persists in using Zantetsu as a distraction, employing its speed to weave around the golems rather than trying to chop them down directly. Cocolle is stunned by his quick thinking, though she struggles to keep up with her chanting. As she thinks about it, she understands that if they are going to defeat such a high number of golems, the strength boost alone is not going to cut it. The buff will run out too soon to turn the tide. She considers alternative strategies, realizing that a different buff, one that could enhance Alvin's ability to pierce through the golem's defenses, would yield far better results. She recognizes that Alvin has outstanding combat skills, and so decides to offer a more specialized boost. As she finishes the chant, Alvin can already feel the effects of this new buff running through his body. His eyes widen in disbelief. Turning to her with an incredulous look, he asks if she's serious. She responds matter-of-factly, informing him that he has just received a physical resistance penetration buff. Alvin's heart is racing. This is the first time he has felt this advanced enhancement. Renewed with confidence, he focuses back on the emerald golems. He knows that with this buff, their once impenetrable weak points are now exposed. Driving his sword forward, he strikes one of the golems, and his blade pierces easily through its hardened shell. The blow shatters the core, reducing the golem to rubble. Alvin soon realizes the full potential of the buff. His attacks bypass the golem's natural resistance entirely. It would save them precious time. He looks back at Cocolle with a determined smile, telling her that he will depend on her support from then on. She smiles back, grateful for his trust, and softly thanks him, her eyes gleaming with admiration for his precise strike on the golem's weak point. The golems shift their attention to Alvin, their heavy forms turning toward him. Without a second thought, he shouts out across the battlefield, yelling for the adventurers he guessed are trapped. His voice rings out in the cavern as he notifies them he and Cocolle will deal with a few more golems from this side. A faint reply drifts back, but Alvin can't quite make out the words. He turns back to the fray and darts through another core of a golem, with ease shattering its core. He pants sharply, "Mutt that as long as the party members are alive. This is all that matters." His blade dances across the battlefield, cutting down the golems one after another, each movement fluid and precise. At last the last of the golems have crumbled into pieces. Cocolle steps forward, offering him a small smile as she commends his efforts. He praises her buff, noting how effective it was throughout the entire battle. With concern in his voice, he asks if she is all right after expending so much mana. She nods, reassuring him that she is perfectly fine. Alvin is clearly surprised. The buff had lasted through every single golem encounter, something he found remarkable. His eyes narrow slightly as he recalls that she is level 80. Letting out a soft chuckle, Cocolle seems to be in exceptionally good spirits. Alvin observes this, musing that her level must indeed make a difference. He concludes that there is no need to worry. His gaze shifts across the battlefield, finally settling on the adventurer on the opposite side. Alvin's sigh of relief quickly turns into raised eyebrows when the smoke clears and he sees only one girl standing there. He cautiously approaches her, scratching his head in confusion and asking if she's flying solo. The girl sheepishly apologizes, leaving Alvin and Cocolle utterly bewildered. As they make their way to safety, Alvin listens to her story with bugged-out eyes, completely taken aback by what he's hearing. She points out that the map doesn't show where the ceiling and walls stick out weirdly, creating a trap that stops golems in their tracks. And get this, those emerald golems can't shoot long-range attacks, so she's been effortlessly farming them with her magic, keeping herself out of harm's way. When he questions if she's responsible for rounding up all those golems, it suddenly dawns on him that they might have messed with her farming setup by taking them down. But she brushes off his worries, saying it was just a side gig. Alvin is confused and asks if she's also here to take on the boss. The girl chuckles and shakes her head. She flat out tells him that taking on a dungeon boss solo is a big fat no-no. As a mage, she points out that it's just too risky to go it alone. You need a team for this stuff, buddy. Alvin nods in agreement, like, yeah, you're right. The girl chills out and mentions how she'll eventually have to snag the boss monster's loot from the dungeon. Her logic? Well, she needs to eliminate her minus skill, duh. Both Cocolle and Alvin exchange a look, silently acknowledging the wisdom in her words. The girl is shocked to know that Alvin and Cocolle are in a temporary party. Alvin mentions that they met on floor 17, where he recruited her. Cocolle addresses the girl as Melina-san. She quickly assumes that they want to know about her minus skill. Without hesitation, she blurts out its name, God of Envy's divine protection. She describes that because of this skill, she can't make a proper party and as a result has always flown solo despite being a sorceress. When Alvin asks about the effects of her minus skill, Molina questions if he is intrigued before proceeding with an answer. She clarifies that the skill has no effect when she is solo, so her explanation assumes she is part of a party. First, she clarifies its initial effect. The stats of all party members are boosted by 10%. The killer's stats, however, decrease by 3% after every kill. This penalty is considered a debuff and accumulates after every kill. Alvin does the math fast and infers that if someone has enough kills, his stats would theoretically hit 0. Molina smiles at him, finding it funny that he assumes that and corrects him. She clarifies that this does not make the stats completely useless. Starting from the 4th kill, no stat increases are granted. Instead, the killer's base stats begin to decrease. By 40 kills, this penalty can result in a 70% reduction in base stats. Adding that as a debuff, the effect fades over time, preventing indefinite penalties, though even temporary reductions can heavily impact combat performance. Alvin considers this and concludes that her minus skill doesn't sound as terrible as it initially seemed. Molina denies his assertion, arguing that the actual danger comes from the 3rd effect of the skill, which she considers the most destructive effect on a party's coherence. Alvin finds that her skill has become complicated for him. She urges them to set aside the 10% stat increase and focus on the 3rd effect. Molina elaborates, explaining that bonus gains from kills are evenly distributed among the party. She adds that the killer will not only suffer a stat debuff, but also have their bonus stats stolen and redistributed. In this situation, the response of the attacker will be of great importance. Alvin assumes it makes sense for party members not to take kills because other people should complete finishing off enemies. Molina states that it creates huge difficulties for fighters because they will often not have a chance actively to secure kills and might create accidents that can get pretty dangerous in dungeons. She elaborates on the stakes within a dungeon. No matter how dazzling a combat scene appears, every action taken results in wear and tear, causing damage and reducing HP. Battle performance may not initially suffer from decreasing HP, but once it hits 0, death is irreversible, with no magic or items able to revive the fallen. Melina recounts chilling tales of individuals prioritizing kill trading over aiding injured monsters. As a rearguard, her spellcasting requires time, making it impossible to consistently cover her party's backs. Due to this skill, she has been in numerous critical situations. Most of those involved suicidal, foolish charges, putting the lives of party members in danger. Finally, things would become too risky for Molina, and she would be either sent away from parties or would leave on her own. Alvin, being inquisitive, asks if this is the reason she prefers to go solo. She responds with a defeated tone, saying that she doesn't want to lose her life by mistake because of her skill. She adds that although in theory it sounds better to be solo flying, it's still basically dangerous by its nature. Melina then remembers the rumors surrounding the Setting Sun dungeon and its boss. Rumors had it that an item from its drop would erase the skills of any who acquired it. She states that she has already mapped the route to the boss. Alvin reflects on what that would mean for her. Something bothers him in the situation. Even if he is going to take a kill, he thought, he does not require the extra bonus, and he doesn't care that it be distributed. And that thought stuck inside his head. As they continued with their conversation, Molina mentioned that she used to trap and hunt golems just to earn more. Her current plan involves hiring someone to challenge the boss, though she acknowledges the potential for trouble if she doesn't secure a binding contract through payment. Until then, she resolves to continue flying solo. Suddenly, Cocolle interjects, proposing that Molina team up with them. Startled, Molina hesitates, questioning if Cocolle even heard what she had just explained. She cautions Alvin that hesitating over a kill would put him in just as much danger as anyone else. However, Cocolle, unrelenting in her determination, insists that they should give it a try. Flustered, Molina reluctantly agrees to the suggestion. The group proceeds to floor 24, where Molina cautiously inquires about their plan. Cocolle responds that they intend to defeat a monster together as a party. Alvin is interested to note that his stats have gone up by 10%, which proves the effect of Molina's skill. She asks if they are leveling up, as even non-combatants get a steady stream of bonuses in this case. She further adds that if they want to level up more efficiently, they should do it in a certain way. But Cocolle cuts her off, refusing the suggestion. She states that she does not need to level up since she probably won't gain any kill bonuses anyway. Before they can continue with their talk, Alvin warns them of the arrival of a tentacle plant, and its twisted limbs mean that it would be a real challenge to defeat. Melina confidently tells them to leave it to her. She immediately starts chanting, and Alvin is amazed at how fast and precise she is. She can unleash a fireball within mere moments, blazing through the air as it strikes the plant, which immediately is engulfed in flames. The group watches as the thing burns. Alvin is shocked by Melina's skill as she kills the tentacle plant with one blow. Proudly, she boasts that despite her appearance, she is level 38 after all, and suggests that attacking with the attribute the enemy is weak against can yield significant results. Alvin and Melina exchange a confused response. Cocolle jumps in, asking what types of attributes Melina can use. Calmly, she replies that she could wield 5 primary attributes and has mastered everything usable at level 38. Also, she personally picked her favorite spells to boost her repertoire. Cocolle is visibly shocked, declaring that Melina's level is extra, not to mention that she could use 5 primary attributes. Alvin, intrigued, asks Cocolle if she isn't amazing too. Cocolle quickly highlights how a caster's attributes determine their spell variety, noting the vastly different incantations required. She adds that as a caster levels up, the complexity and number of spells they must master grow exponentially. Alvin recalls someone he knew with 3 key attributes, marveling at the comparison. Almost before Alvin's head can take it anymore, Cocolle springs to his side, snapping him on the wrist enthusiastically. Melina scored an A+ for each of the 5 attributes she presented. She simply must, have this mind to remember, for there are hundreds of those enchantment incantations. Alvin, taken aback by her proximity, tells her to stop. However, he can't help but be astounded that Melina managed to memorize such an enormous library of spells. Melina, breaking the moment of silence, she reveals she possesses 5 attribute-enhancing skills for reasons even she can't grasp. Determined not to waste her talents, she pushed herself to master every possible spell. Cocolle, impressed, goes on to express her utmost reverence for Melina. Enjoying the attention, Melina asserts that when solo, the best strategy is to exploit as many of the enemy's weak attributes as possible. Alvin smiles, thinking that being a solo sorceress seems far from ideal. Yet he admires the extraordinary effort she's put in to reach this level. Now suddenly realizing something, Cocolle opens the party status window to inspect the buff given by Melina's skill. She then points out a strange melt icon, something she's never seen before. Curiously pointing it out, Melina calmly states that's her skill's curse. She also managed to slay the monster. The buff has been tagged into her. Both Alvin and Cocolle started checking the status screen for their stats, only finding that it decreased by 3%. Melina mentioned how it was bound to happen, but feels something's odd. The endowment effect never actually happened. Maintaining her composure, Cocolle suggests they engage in another battle to better understand the skill's effects. They soon encounter their next target, an emerald golem. Alvin observes that this time the golem isn't stuck, making it more difficult for the rear guard to contribute effectively. Determined, he declares that he will join the battle, but just before that, a magic ball attacks the golem with unimaginable force and bashes it back. Alvin is shocked by this extreme power. He then utilizes the opportunity and delivers a heady attack, jumping up to slash the golem in its head. The strike finishes it off, though Alvin notes that the golem was already left with so little HP that a single heady attack would have sufficed, even without a buff. Molina compliments Alvin, praising his impressive skills and implying that he must be highly leveled. Nervously, Alvin denies being as high-leveled as Cocolle, attempting to downplay her assumption. He then asks how the party's status looks, but Cocolle glances at the party status window and tells him that it's not here. Confused, Melina asks what she means. Ignoring the question, an excited Cocolle suddenly asks Melina to form a permanent party with her. Shocked, Melina hesitantly asks if they aren't already in a party. Realizing her mistake, Cocolle explains that this isn't what she meant. Thinking hard about how to express her feelings, she takes Melina's hand and blurts out that she should stay with her forever from now. Utterly bewildered, she stares at her in confusion, unsure of how to respond. Melina blushes, admitting that Cocolle's sudden statement has put her in a difficult position. She points out that they are both women after all. Cocolle, confused by the remark, tilts her head, only for realization to dawn on her. Flustered, she remembers she had done something similar with Alvin Sam before. Alvin, curious, asks what exactly they did, but Cocolle stammers, trying to find the words. Finally, she clarifies to Melina that she wants her to stay in a party with her, even after they leave the dungeon. Having understood the actual intention, Melina blushes again, then coughs to regain composure. She asks if she hasn't already clarified that she can't be included in a party due to her skill. She looks at Alvin, asking if he doesn't mind her predicament. Alvin replies calmly that he doesn't mind at all. At this point, both Alvin and Cocolle reveal that they also possess minus skills. Curious, Melina listens as they explain their abilities. Surprised, she remarks that the effects of their skills are hard to believe. However, she admits that if they weren't real, it wouldn't be logical for Cocolle to be level 80 while Alvin is only level 43. Alvin said that his situation made it inevitable for him to earn drops at a slower rate. Melina nodded in understanding their circumstances. She says that they all appear to have the same goal, but if their offer to collaborate is based on sympathy, she will only accept their feeling and stay in her own way of doing things. Cocolle slightly interrupts, assuring Melina that it isn't sympathy that is driving her. She encourages Melina to check her status in the party's status screen. Curious, she obeys and is surprised to find she does not have the curse of the god of envy anymore. In addition, she has gained the kill bonus from the tentacle plant, which came as a surprise to her. Shocked, she continues to investigate and realizes that Cocolle has 2 layers of curses placed on her status. She inquires if Melina San recalls the effect of her own skill. She replies that in her party, 1 kill made by a different person will be considered she killed a monster. Cocolle is smiling and gives a confirmation, describing that for her usurper of the head skill, every killer will have his kill declared as hers. This could mean negative effects of the skill Melina has transferred to the killer, which is Cocolle herself. Additionally, she clarifies that this way she will be able to refund all the experience points that she had stolen from others. Melina digests this explanation and concludes that, given these conditions, Cocolle will never earn any bonuses again. With a smile, she reassures her that she is more than happy with this deal. Melina turns to Alvin and declares that since the bonus would now be evenly shared, there is not much of a benefit for him to take a kill either. Alvin responds sincerely, saying that he actually prefers it that way. According to him, no one deserves to get all the credit for a kill. Even with the emerald golem he defeated earlier, he admits it was only possible thanks to their combined effort. Melina hesitates, stammering as she points out another issue. She reminds them that the curse of her skill, which is typically distributed among combatants, will now solely affect Cocolle, reducing her stats by 3% and multiplying with each additional kill. Cocolle smiles warmly and shows Melina her clear skill, which can remove debuffs if they become overwhelming. Worried, Melina asks if that spell also removes buffs and notes that it takes a long time to chant, meaning it wouldn't be practical to use in the midst of battle. Cocolle reassures her, pointing out that even with half stats, her level 80 strength surpasses other priestesses. She vows to focus solely on her role as a healer, no matter the circumstances. Overcome with emotion, Molina tearfully asks why others would accept such a disadvantage for her sake. Cocolle grows serious, admitting she too can no longer bear relying on others' sacrifices. She confesses her regret over gaining experience points at her former companion's expense and leveling up through their efforts. Smiling, she adds that debuffs can be managed with creativity and effort, so they shouldn't worry. Melina looks startled by Cocolle's sincerity. Alvin gently suggests she stay with their party a bit longer, noting it's safer to tackle the dungeon and earn money together. With a thoughtful smile, he asks her opinion. After a brief silence, Melina smiles and agrees, hoping to get along, even if temporarily. Overjoyed, Cocolle grabs her hand, and Alvin shakes it firmly, sharing her excitement. Cocolle laughs cheerfully, her happiness unabated despite not receiving any experience bonuses. Molina raises an eyebrow and comments that the things Cocolle finds joy in are truly out of this world. She grins at Alvin, teasingly asking if handling the front line alone is too much of a burden. He shakes his head with a light chuckle, admitting that with healing support and extra firepower, the task feels manageable. He mentions that his minus skill is now nullified, allowing him to gain experience bonuses, and adds that he feels he should apologize for reaping so many benefits. Cocolle responds with a warm smile, assuring him there's no need for apologies. Molina nods in agreement, saying that if Alvin is indeed a swordsman, he is an excellent wall for the party. Alvin feels comforted and says if he is doing his job so well, he's glad to hear it. They go further when Alvin suddenly notices something above them. The others look at him curiously and ask him to explain what it is. Molina, unable to see it, asks him to read it aloud since he's tall enough to make it out. Alvin obediently reads the text, pondering its resemblance to the dungeon entrance inscription. He mulls over the idea of flipping it upside down instead of reading it the traditional way. Cocolle contemplates the potential foreshadowing of a boss drop but finds nothing that quite clicks. Molina thinks out loud, considering how dungeons seem to spawn randomly around the world but disappear once the boss has been defeated. This is only one shot at taking the boss drop. She decides to confirm the details and listen carefully to what Alvin and Cocolle have to say. Turning to Alvin, she asks him if he intends to challenge the boss. He tells her that her assumption is correct, adding that their party is managing well and hasn't reached the point of exhaustion. His intention, therefore, is to proceed further into the dungeon. Then Melina asks if he has any ideas for what the boss might drop. Cocolle interrupts, coldly questioning if Melina is speaking of how it might be used once. Surprised, Melina responds that maybe it won't be rare, and maybe could even be used more than one time. She is skeptical, however. If such items existed in abundance, no one would ever have minus skills. That seems impossible. Instead, she theorizes is probably something consumable that disappears after a single use. Though there are likely enough drops for a party that clears the dungeon, she doubts it. Having never seen consumable boss drops, she wonders if the item has limited uses. If so, she laments being back to square one. Alvin and Cocolle reply in unison, assuring Molina they will take care of this matter once they get what they want. She is astounded, surprised by their coordination. She asks if they do not know each other too well, for their harmony seems suspiciously smooth, and then wonders aloud whether she is being duped. Sensing her unease, Alvin urges her to listen to their reasoning with her first. He points out that their situations are constantly changing. For example, as their raid continues, they may discover something new or get overwhelmed by rivals. He argues that they should take prompt action, beginning with securing the boss's loot. Melina agrees, realizing that Cocolle and Alvin are both highly skilled. From their words and actions, she senses they are not motivated by self-interest or foolishness. She feels that if she stays with them, they may come up with a decision that would be acceptable to her. Melina suddenly catches Cocolle's expression and asks her why she is doing that. Melina points out that the most practical approach would be to worry about the item once she gets it. But this is a quick way to get them to their destination. Alvin smiles and says he is doing his best for it to happen. Cocolle is full of enthusiasm and said she'd give her all too. Melina, momentarily dazed, bursts into laughter at the strange noises Cocolle makes, and the latter becomes flustered. Melina continues, stating that she wants to go on adventures with comrades like them and that she should not overanalyze her decision to join them. Alvin then states that they should begin by finding the safe zone on this floor. Melina and Cocolle both agree with him. Then they hear a scream so piercing that it sends a chill down their spines. Molina is terrified and asks about the terrifying noise, while Cocolle tries to figure out where it is coming from, but she cannot pinpoint it because of the echoes. Just then, Alvin catches wind of something and tells them it is coming from behind. They turn quickly around to see a man running toward them, shouting at them to run. Behind him is a horde of monsters. Without a second thought, the party prepares to help. Melina is surprised that Alvin and Cocolle are immediately ready, not even having a second's doubt. Alvin shouts, recommending changing formation. Melina moves forward and demands to do this. She points out that during the battle, the monsters will face a powerful area effect spell. Alvin asks her if she is referring to such a spell, reminding her that there is an adventurer right in front of them. She assures him that it will be all right and that she will tell the man to dodge left at the precise moment that she casts the spell. Alvin understands and gets ready to signal the adventurer. Cocolle lets Melina know that she is going to cast a buff on her and asks if the lightning element would be enough. Melina thanks Alvin for his coordination and lets Cocolle know it is okay to proceed. Alvin gets ready and shouts to the adventurer, instructing him to evade to the side once they give him the signal. The man looks visibly confused and asks Alvin which side he is talking about. Alvin points to a specific location, but the man hesitates when he notices a hole there. Curious, Alvin asks why the monsters are chasing him. The adventurer deduces that Alvin's instructions mean they are preparing to use an area of effect spell. Miscommunication briefly ensues, but Alvin assumes the message has been understood and urges Melina to get ready. As Melina unleashes her spell, the adventurer leaps at the signal. The spell strikes the monsters with tremendous force, and the man dives into the hole for safety. He emerges from his escape and says Melina handled him pretty rough. She says that even so, the man emerged without any harm done. Alvin is stunned at the show of strength, noting how easily she dismantled the monsters. Her keen, pointed eyes and authoritative demeanor impress her upon him. He also comments on how an escape is just that location he finds is actually perfect for an escape hole. Melina nonchalantly says this is a fascination with unknown geographical features, indicating perhaps it could have been good intuition. He goes over to Cocolle, asking how her debuffs are. Cocolle reassures him that she has all the effects cleared at the moment. Then Melina asks if they would tackle the rest of the monsters. Alvin agrees and turns it over to her and Cocolle to make decisions. The group continued attacking the creatures without a care. Meanwhile, an adventurer who saw their ferocity and skill in combat joins their cause. He pulls his sword and advances. Alvin, sensing his intent, advises the man not to overexert himself and assures him that he can rest if needed. But to Alvin's shock, the man suddenly disappears from view, only to reappear in midair moments later.
Here I am, know it's been